have been talking about how we can do a better job of engaging our members of the Consumer Voice, because we value your input and your participation in the work that we do, and also want to hear about the work that you do. And we decided that we would launch these quarterly member calls where which would be an exclusive member benefit for members of the Consumer Voice, where we can do a few things, such as talk to you about the work that we're doing, our program and policy work, where we could dig into some issues, have conversations about some of the hot topics or issues that are being discussed nationally and around the country, and also use it as an opportunity to connect with you, hear about the work that you're doing, the hot topics that you're working on, and not only connect you, we hope, better with us, but also with each other. So this is our, as I mentioned, our very first one. So we have a full agenda for you today. We're going to be talking for the next hour about some different program and policy work that we're doing. We did select a hot topic that we're going to talk to you about, which is electronic recording or use of surveillance cameras in nursing homes. And then we'll give you a policy update on some national items that we've been working on and sharing information with you about. And then we'll open the lines and hear from you all about what questions you have, or what topics you might want to talk about, or even hear from you about things that you're working on. So we're thrilled that you're here with us today. We have online most of the Consumer Voice staff, and we've got a good group of members that are starting to sign in. So welcome to you all. And let's get started with some program updates. And Tina, if you'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some of the new things that we have going on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Steyer. I'm the Communications and Membership Coordinator at Consumer Voice. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of exciting things we have going on. First, you can see here our Resident Advocate newsletter. This is our brand new free quarterly newsletter that gets mailed to residents of long-term care facilities. So you can see the first page of our first issue there on your screen. This newsletter provides residents with information on residents' rights and care issues, news and updates on national policy, and self-advocacy tips for getting person-centered quality care. And in our first issue, we even had a featured article written by a resident on advocating for yourself. So we think it's going to be a really exciting, great resource. So this newsletter is snail-mailed quarterly to long-term care consumers, and then everyone can get it on our website for download. So you can get our first issue that came out in July on our website and download, print it out, and share it with whoever you think would be interested in residents. If you're interested in getting a copy mailed to you or multiple copies mailed to you, we do have a subscription, so you can go ahead and check that out as well. And then the next thing I want to talk about is Residents' Rights Month, which is coming up here in October. I think most everyone knows what Residents' Rights Month is, but if not, I'll give a little refresher. It's an annual event that's designated by us, the Consumer Voice, and it's celebrated in October to honor residents living in long-term care facilities and also consumers receiving services in their home or community. And it's basically just a time to celebrate and recognize all residents' rights. And this year's theme is It's All About Me, My Life, My Care, My Choices. And that's meant to focus on the respect and dignity of every resident. So we want to highlight resident-directed care and emphasize the self-determination, choice, and quality of life of each resident. So I hope everyone's planning to participate. You can do so by planning an event or an activity in your local community during October. And we have a really great resource this year, which is a calendar that has an activity idea for each day during the month of October. So you can do all of the ideas or just to pick a couple of them to get some excitement going on in your community for Residents' Rights Month. And if you do plan on doing an activity, please let us know details beforehand, takes a lot of photos, and send them to us because we love to post those on our website and put them on social media to see what everyone's doing across the country. The other part of Residents' Rights Month is the Residents' Voice Challenge. So that is an opportunity for residents or any long-term care consumers to reflect on the year's theme and share their opinion about the theme. So we have prompt questions on our website to kind of get started thinking about our theme. The questions are kind of about how do you make your own choices, how do you get good quality of life, good quality of care. So we encourage consumers to submit essays or poems or artwork. Especially this year, we'd love to see videos. So you can get your submissions in. We post those on the Residents' Voice Challenge webpage on our website. And then during the month of October, we're going to highlight entries on our homepage, put them on Facebook and Twitter and in our emails. So those are due September 1st. So you still got some time to get your entries in. And one last thing about Residents' Rights Month is that we do have buttons for sale. So the buttons are a really great way to promote the year's theme. And we see a lot of people use them as gifts or giveaways for residents or volunteers or family members. So be sure to check those out on our website. So the other new exciting resource we have is the Residents' Rights posters. So you can see our nice poster there on your slide. This is a newly designed poster that's meant to be really easy to read. It's printed on nice sturdy paper so you can post it and display it in a facility, like on a wall in a facility, in a resident room, or in your offices. So we have a couple different options depending on what you're trying to use it for. We have like 11 by 17 or an 18 by 24, which is a little bit bigger, and a vertical or horizontal version. So lots of choices. And one other version, which I think a lot of folks find helpful, especially for ombudsman programs, is we do have a version where at the bottom where you see get help, it'll be blank. So you can add your own ombudsman program contact information there. So be sure to check that stuff out on our website, and I'll pass it back over to Lori.
Great, thanks, Tina. We've been really pleased that we've actually been getting a lot of nursing homes that have been ordering our posters. So if you go in on your regular visits and see one of the posters, please let us know, because we're delighted to see that they're being ordered and are being put up into the nursing homes for residents and families to see. Next slide, please, Tina. One of the other things that we instituted over the last year that we're really excited about is a Consumer Advisory Council, which is an advisory council for us on staff made up of individuals who are receiving long-term services and supports, either as residents of nursing homes and assisted living facilities or receiving care in a home care setting. And we have a really fantastic and dynamic group of people that have been working with us over the past year. We've been having bi-monthly conference calls with them. They're about an hour long each time. And as we pull them together and we think about different things to talk about, they've been really invaluable in providing input and comments to us on different policy issues. So for example, as we were developing our comments and feedback to CMS on not only the new nursing home regulations, but also on the new interpretive guidelines that were being developed, we would bring up some of the various issues that were being proposed by CMS with our with the folks on the Consumer Advisory Council, and we would talk through those issues and get their feedback, which really helped in shaping the comments that we were able to provide back to CMS. We were thrilled that 2 of the members of our Consumer Advisory Council actually were invited by CMS to 2 week-long in-person technical expert panel type programs to go through section by section the interpretive guidelines as CMS was developing them, and they really were fantastic contributors to the discussions that were being considered for each of the different sections of the guidelines. During these calls, we also talk about a variety of issues, either brought up by the members of the council or by the staff based on things that we're hearing or seeing around the country. So it's a really good opportunity for not just the residents and other consumers to talk among themselves and share their experiences and how things might be different or the same in their care settings, but also to share with us what their experiences are and give us feedback on different issues that we might be working on or hearing about from residents or ombudsmen or other advocates. So we're really excited to be having this terrific group of people that we're working with. We're looking to grow the council. So if you have a resident or other consumer receiving services in their home, in a community-based setting, or a resident of a nursing home or assisted living facility that you think would enjoy being part of this council, who would be able to participate on a 1-hour conference call every other month, please send us their contact information and we'll reach out to them and talk to them about what's involved in the council and see if they would like to participate. But we're really looking to have additional consumers who can be part of this and who might be interested in doing not only some networking with other consumers, but some even advocacy themselves and be involved in some policy issues. Next slide, please, Tina. We're going to talk to you about a few of the projects that we're working on this next slide, and we'll also then, after this, be turning to a policy update. But first, just want to share with you, as you know, the National Ombudsman Resource Center is operated out of our office here at the Consumer Voice. We've been hosting that for a long number of years now, and we are thrilled to share that we've recently been awarded a new 3-year grant to continue our operations of the Ombudsman Resource Center, where we continue to provide training, support, and technical assistance to state and local ombudsman programs across the country. We've got just a really fantastic team of staff that are working on the Ombudsman Resource Center issues. And one of the things we're really excited about this grant cycle is that we will be spending some good time updating our online training curricula for ombudsmen and the modules that go along with that, upgrading the online system that we're using so that it'll be more user-friendly and interactive. So we're getting started on that, and as we're also updating the content, not only to reflect maybe some new information or changes in the regulations, or actually the fact that there are now ombudsman regulations, which there weren't when the curricula was developed initially, but we'll also be incorporating some new examples and best practices and things like that into the curriculum. So we're really excited about that, and also that is going to feed into the launch of a new training center for ombudsman programs that we will be launching as well. That will include sample in-service trainings and PowerPoints and different types of trainings that you'll be able to take and use not only with your staff and volunteers, but share with residents and families and others. So lots of great work going on through the Ombudsman Resource Center, and don't hesitate to check out that work on the Ombudsman Center website or reach out to any of us on staff, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, who's going to share some information about a couple other projects that we're working on.
Great, thank you. So first, I'll talk about our nursing home closure project. Last year, Consumer Voice received a grant from the Retirement Research Foundation and completed a study on nursing home closures. We looked at challenges to a successful closure and best practices. Our report that includes our findings and recommendations is on our website. From the findings of our study, we realized that much needs to be done in states to improve the closure process for residents. As a result, we obtained a second grant from the Retirement Research Foundation to develop training and resources and work with 2 states on developing and implementing strategies for improving the closure process. Currently, we have been working with Tennessee and Michigan to improve their state's closure process. Both states are developing a multi-agency nursing home closure relocation team that will be the first responders and oversee nursing home closures. The presence of relocation teams was one of the best practices identified in states that have made a difference in ensuring the safe and orderly transfer of residents. Relocation teams also have made a difference in protecting residents' rights and minimizing transfer trauma that residents experience during a nursing home closure. If you would like more information about this project, please contact us with questions. You can email us or give us a call. The next project that I'll talk about is our Virginia Family Council project. So the Edward H. Lane Foundation, which is a Virginia-based foundation, works with Consumer Voice to support and enhance family councils in the state of Virginia. Through the Francis Lane Memorial Family Council Fund, Consumer Voice makes information and resources available to Virginia family councils. In addition, Virginia family councils can apply for grants for up to $1,000 to support family council development and activities. Each year, we grant 2 to 4 pass-through grants to family councils. Examples of how they've used these funds include creation of family council brochures and flyers and other marketing materials, bulletin boards that are posted in the facilities, materials and refreshments for monthly meetings, bringing in guest speakers, and having special events for residents, family members, and staff, including holiday parties, derby days, and game nights. Consumer Voice has also used the funds to support communication among Virginia family councils through a listserv, webinar, and participation at our annual conference. If you would like more information about this project, you can visit our Family Council Center on our website or contact us with questions. Next slide, please.
So good afternoon. I'm Robin Grant, the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, and I just want to give you a few updates of some of what's going on and what we're doing in the policy arena. So I want to start by talking about Medicaid, then talk about nursing home regulations, arbitration, and then the home and community-based services settings rule. And I will note that these are some of the major things we've been working on, but we've certainly been working on other things as well. It has been an unbelievably busy time in the policy world, that's for sure. So starting with Medicaid, as I'm sure you're all aware, we've been advocating against really devastating Medicaid cuts. And the restructuring of Medicaid basically since day one of this Congress and this administration. So it started, I should say, on the House side with a bill called the American Health Care Act, and that bill called for drastic restructuring of the Medicaid program into per capita caps. Which over the next decade would have basically led to more than $800 billion in cuts. And we know that that would have had would have decimated the Medicaid program as we know it today, and would have likely led to cuts in services, changes in access to care, or very limited access care, fewer people being able to serve, a whole host of effects that would have had terrible negative consequences for long-term care consumers in any setting, and of course their families as well. So the American Health Care Act passed out of the House, went to the Senate. The Senate then came up with its own version. They changed the name. It became the Better Care Reconciliation Act, except at least from our perspective, it wasn't better care. It kept the same restructuring of Medicaid into caps, and it also retained the same devastating cuts. So the fight to protect Medicaid really kind of heated up and became very focused on the Senate side, and just a tremendous amount of energy really across the country went into this effort from many, many groups. So as you all know, we worked really hard on that issue along with everybody in our network. We also joined with many other organizations because this was truly a case of united we stand and divided we fall. So we took numerous actions. I mean, we issued action alerts. We did a virtual national briefing. We created issue briefs and handouts and fact sheets. We made numerous visits to members of Congress. We created a Medicaid Story gathering kit and then launched a Medicaid Story campaign. And we even did a virtual rally and call-in. And I'm delighted to say that all that tremendous advocacy from so many people really paid off. The Senate health care bill was defeated in late July, and it really was a tremendous victory, and I think a really amazing example of what we all can accomplish when we join together. And all of you on the phone today with us, those of you contacted your members of Congress and maybe you also told others to do so, you're part of that victory. And your advocacy played a really important role. And we want to make sure that you know that, and we want to thank you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We have been treasuring that victory and enjoying that moment, especially because very sadly the Medicare, that's another battle, but right now I'm just focusing on Medicaid. The Medicaid battle, unfortunately, is not over. We know that the administration's proposed budget includes large cuts to Medicaid. The House Budget Resolution that's been approved by the House Budget Committee contains large cuts to Medicaid. So while there is a temporary lull, we really expect things to start heating up again once Congress is back from recess. So enjoy the remaining days of rest, but please stay tuned and stay prepared. So that's the Medicaid news. Moving on, I want to talk about the federal nursing home regulations. So I'm sure that you all know that the revised federal nursing home regs were issued on October 4th of 2016. And since that time, we at Consumer Voice have really made a major effort to help everyone in our network really try to understand the changes and their impact on residents. And just to share a few of the things that we've done, and we've conducted webinars, we've written issue briefs on a number of different topics such as transfer discharge, visitation, and many others. We developed a two-part summary that highlights the key changes in the regulations. We created a side-by-side that compares the previous regs to the revised regs. And the Ombudsman Resource Center created a great side-by-side chart that has references to the long-term care ombudsman program that are in the revised regs, and language that's also drawn from the preamble, and then compared it to the previous regs. So we tried to present information in a number of different ways. You've also just heard about the new residents' rights poster. That's sort of part of education as well, and we're very excited about the poster. Once you start changing one thing, though, that kind of has a ripple effect. So the revision of the regulations meant that the interpretive guidelines that go with the regulations also had to be revised. And just as a reminder, the interpretive guidelines are the guidance that surveyors use to determine if a nursing home is complying with the rules. So as soon as the regulations were published, CMS started asking stakeholders, including us, for input on its draft guidance. and we literally spent months providing written input, in addition to participating in-person meetings and work groups. And Lori talked with you and mentioned that we had a couple of members of the Consumer Advisory Council that were really key players in that process and helped us both with the written input as well as attending those meetings in person, and their input was just invaluable. So the revised guidelines are now out. They were released a short time ago, but they don't go into effect until November 28th of this year. So I would recommend that you circle November 28th actually on your calendar, because it has become a major date in the nursing home world. I mean, that's the day, as I said, the guidelines go into effect. It's also the day that phase 2 of the revised regulations go into effect. You'll remember that there are 3 phases. And November 28th is the day that a new survey process will be started. Lots and lots of things happening all on the same day. At the same time, though, that we've got revised regulations being implemented, there have been efforts to repeal them. The first threat to the regs this year was from Congress, which had the authority to completely repeal the regulations through a law that's called the Congressional Review Act. So from day one of this year, we were working nonstop to counter those efforts, and I'm really happy to report that, thank goodness, they were successful. But now the move to roll back the regulations has moved from kind of the legislative approach to the regulatory approach. It's just taking a different form. In early June of this year, CMS released a proposed rule to reverse its own regulation that had been issued last October that banned the use of pre-dispute arbitration agreements in nursing homes. I'm going to talk more in depth about arbitration in just a bit, but that was a major example of a rollback, an effort to roll back a current regulation. So in addition, CMS also asked for what it called stakeholder feedback on eliminating or modifying certain parts of 3 requirements that are in the revised regulations. So that those areas were quality assurance and performance improvement, discharge notices to ombudsman, and the grievance process. So we formed a work group at Consumer Voice to get some input to respond to that request for feedback. And we did submit comments, which were due at the end of June, and the position we took was certainly to oppose the elimination or modification of those requirements, which we felt were really important. In addition to those 3 specific requirements that CMS was looking at, the agency also kind of opened the door very broadly to suggestions from stakeholders on any aspects of the regulation at all that should be eliminated or modified, specifically with the goal to reduce provider burden. And I have to say that we are very concerned about what CMS is going to do with that feedback, and also the feedback on the 3 areas. But when you open it up and you ask for any feedback on any aspects of the regulations, that means that really the entire set of regulations is sort of open and could be a possible target of elimination or modification. So that is something we're monitoring, and we'll be watching very closely. One last thing, as we all know, you can have the best regulations in the world, but if they're not enforced, they're pretty much meaningless. So we are also concerned about what seems to be a movement toward weakening the enforcement system. I mean, CMS has reversed itself on a couple of policies and has recently kind of issued guidance that basically changes how it's approaching the civil monetary penalties. It's talking about using these per instance penalties for problems that existed prior to a survey, except when there's really serious injury or abuse. And then per day penalties for issues that are found during surveys, but there are lots of exceptions to those per day penalties. And what that means is I think there will be less impact on facilities and less incentive to change things quickly and to prevent future non-compliance, because overall, when you do per instance versus per day penalties, the overall amount is certainly less. So again, that's something that's on our radar screen and that we're voicing concerns about and will be working to address. Okay, moving on to arbitration. So as I said, CMS had released a proposed rule that would, again, permit nursing homes to use these pre-dispute arbitration agreements. And just as a quick reminder, so arbitration is a process in which a dispute is settled using one or more arbitrators who then decide the outcome instead of a jury that's made up of members of the community. So we have some concerns about arbitration in general, but it can be appropriate for the right people in the right circumstances. Our huge concern when it comes to pre-dispute arbitration is the fact that it's pre-dispute. The major issue is that prospective residents and their families basically are pressured into signing these agreements at the time of admission and before any dispute arises. So if you're doing it before this dispute, you have no idea what the issue might be, and frankly, it could be something like abuse, neglect, or wrongful death. So you don't know what you're even going to be disputing. You can't make an informed decision because you have no idea what the dispute is. And on top of it all, you're being forced into making a decision at the time of admission, which all of us know is just a terrible time. It's an extremely stressful time for both the resident and for family members. So the regs back in October had basically banned pre-dispute arbitration agreements, and so the proposed reg would, basically reinstate them. But the rule goes even one step farther and would allow nursing homes to require. They would be allowed to require pre-dispute arbitration agreements in order for someone to be admitted. So they would be a condition of admission, which has never been the case and makes the rule, this proposed rule, just even worse than any situation we had even before the revised reg came out. So because this would be so harmful to consumers, we really went all out in our advocacy efforts. So we led a work group that was made up of state and national organizations that came together to create and implement strategies to fight the rule. So this group drafted a sign-on comment letter, and then we worked really hard to get as many individuals and both state and national groups as we possibly could to sign on, and we ended up with over 850 individuals and over 150 groups signing on. So we were very pleased with that, and that comment letter was submitted to CMS. But we took other action as well. I'm sure you noted in your inbox versus the many, many, many action alerts that we sent out. We did write our own comments and submitted those. We provided sample comments to folks in the network because some people, in addition to signing on, wanted to submit their own, and many people did. We were really pleased to see that. We also contacted members of the Senate, asked them to sign on to a congressional letter to CMS, and then lastly, we co-authored an op-ed piece that was featured in the Huffington Post. So lots of work around this issue. CMS now has all the comments, and you know, we don't know what the timeline is at all for any action, but we will be obviously watching that closely and sharing any information we have with all of you. So lastly, let me just switch from the nursing home arena to home and community-based services, and a rule that is part of which has been implemented and part of which is not. So many of you may know that well, it was new at the time, I guess, but a Medicaid home and community-based rule was issued in March of, at this point, 2014. So there were many components to that rule. Part of it had requirements that related to person-centered planning for folks who are receiving HCBS. That part, those rules are already in effect. But another really important set of requirements are those that define what a home and community-based setting actually is. So you might wonder why that was needed, which is a very good question. And the reason is that the whole purpose of HCBS Medicaid services is to be an alternative to institutional settings. But what has happened over the years is that the HCBS funding has been actually used to pay for services and supports that in many cases are being provided in settings that really can feel pretty institutional in nature. And, you know, for instance, some assisted living facilities, you might be hard pressed to differentiate them from nursing homes, or adult day centers may be very institutionalized. So a major reason for the rule was to define the elements or the qualities that really make a home, a setting, something that is truly part of a larger community. So the definition applies to all the settings where HCBS are delivered. So that's adult day centers, for example, as well as assisted living facilities. And then another really important part of the rule is that it calls for full integration of HCBS participants into the community, because a real concern has been that folks have been isolated. They've been in the facility, or they've been in the setting where they have no or extremely little interaction with any of the outer community. Maybe there's some folks from the community that come into the setting, but individuals rarely, if ever, have the opportunity to go out into the community to receive services or participate in activities. So the rule is also designed to stress integration. It emphasizes a wide range of choices, and it also puts in place some additional protections for people receiving HCBS in residential settings, and that includes eviction protections. So the HCBS settings rule, so the part of the rule that refers to the definition of HCBS, is called the settings rule. So it doesn't go into effect until March of 2022. Remember, it came out in 2014. Now, the date was originally 2019. It's been pushed back, so states have more time to come into compliance. But what each state has to do is develop what's called a statewide transition plan. And that outlines what actions the state is going to take to come into compliance with the rule. And that plan has to be completed by 2019. So part of the work that we are doing is advocating for this rule to be effectively implemented, because there are a lot of elements in here that really will improve the quality of life, quality of care, and the protections of HCBS recipients. So just a couple of things that we're working on. We're part of an HCBS advocacy coalition that includes advocates from both the aging and disability community. And an important part of what we do with that group is a lot of meetings with CMS to try to influence the guidance that they issue and basically how they approach implementing the regulation. And then in addition to that, we at Consumer Voice are working, I think, in a number of different ways to try to equip advocates in the field in their work at the state level. So we've been partnering with Justice and Aging, for example, to produce a number of issue briefs. We've been making presentations to state ombudsmen. And right now we're analyzing those transition plans to try to identify some really good advocacy strategies and practices that we hope to be able to share with you all soon. So with that, I'm going to close, and we'll move on to the next slide, please.
Thanks, Robin. This is Lori again, and Tina, if you'll move to the next slide, please, and we'll move on to our next segment of the call today. So as you can tell from the presentation so far from certainly Alicia and Tina and Robin, there's a lot of different activities that have been going on, a lot of different issues being worked on, and our staff are just doing a stellar job in tracking them all and trying to be responsive to all of them, as well as share information with you to know how you best can participate and be active in these policy issues and the other types of issues that we're working on. So I just wanted to say a big kudos to the staff for all of the work that they're doing. One of the things that we wanted to do on these member calls was to take some time to talk about a hot topic that has either come to our attention through work that we're doing, through members themselves or other advocates that we are working with, and spend a little bit of time maybe talking a little bit more in depth about it, having some dialogue about it, or sharing some additional information. And sometimes it'll be those of us on staff who might be talking about the particular issue and getting us started on it. Sometimes we will invite guest speakers to join us on the member calls to talk about a particular area of expertise that they're working on or a particular issue that they're working on. Sometimes maybe it'll be you who would recommend a particular topic that you think would be good for sharing with the other members of Consumer Voice and leading a dialogue on it. So we'd like to invite you to think about different issues or topics that you're working on that you'd like to either hear more about and have maybe some dialogue about that we could maybe help facilitate, or that you'd even like to share with the other members and have some dialogue about as well. And send us your thoughts and ideas, and we will take them into consideration as we do planning for future calls. But we think it's a good opportunity for us not only to have some good dialogue, but share different perspectives on issues and some even best practices or challenges that we all may experience in addressing them. So the topic that we chose for today is one that we've been doing some work on as part of a partnership with the National Center on Elder Abuse, and it's around the issue of surveillance cameras in nursing home residence rooms. Tina, if you'll move to the next slide, please. We have a partnership with the National Center on Elder Abuse to do work on a particular issue every year, where we do some research and develop some consumer information and do some education on a particular topic. And so for our work this year, it's on this particular issue of the use of surveillance cameras. This has been a recurring hot topic over time. It ebbs and flows. Oftentimes it comes to light after a high-profile news article of abuse that's happened in a long-term care facility, or if someone has installed a hidden camera or granny cam electronic monitoring device. There's different terms that are being used around that are being talked about right now. But it usually comes to light after something like that has happened, or one of these devices is being used and has hit the news media. And what we've seen is that certainly a lot of press attention happens when there are different types of abusive situations that may be caught on video or have had an audio recording. And that then often will spur states on to try to address this issue in some way. And then there are often calls for the ability for consumers, residents, and family members to actually put hidden cameras, hidden recording devices into residents' rooms as a means of protecting them. But you know, as we've been thinking about this issue over the last several months, we've really been thinking about how you balance not only protecting residents from abuse, but also the privacy considerations that need to be taken into account. And so as we thought about doing some work on this issue, we really wanted to raise awareness and considerations of the need for balancing privacy and protection, things that need to be considered before you just go out and buy a hidden camera and install it in a room, because there may be considerations that need to be thought about. And also to remind people that these recording devices or monitoring devices certainly can be a tool, but they're not a cure-all for preventing abuse, and that they really need to be thought through carefully before installing, and that other methods also need to be employed, not just reliance on a surveillance camera. Tina, next slide, please. In the research that we've been doing, there are currently 5 states that have laws on the books that permit the installation of cameras in residence rooms if certain conditions are being met. And you'll see on the slide in front of you, those states are Illinois, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, and Washington. There are a handful of other states that have considered legislation over the years, but have not passed the legislation. Maryland, for example, had considered legislation. It did not pass, but instead they have issued guidelines that they use for the use of cameras in residence rooms, which permit the use of the cameras, but put some parameters in effect for when that can happen. And then other states have addressed the issue in different ways. So for New Jersey, for example, has recently expanded to nursing homes a provision that they have had in the state for a while, where the Office of Attorney General will loan for a limited period of time camera equipment to families who may have concerns about the care or potential abuse that may be occurring for their loved one who lives in a nursing home or other covered entity. And the Office of Attorney General will loan the recording devices to the family for a short time to do some information gathering. But as we were looking at the different state laws, there are a number of different issues or considerations that are covered or talked about in those laws, including the issue of consent, not only of the resident who would be at the, recording end of the device, but also their roommate, maybe others in the facility who, in thinking about who has the right to consent on behalf of a resident who may not have the ability to consent if they have if they don't have capacity, for example, or dementia, or another issue that would prevent them from providing consent, whether or not family members or legal guardians have the ability to consent on their behalf. Notice requirements are talked about in the different state laws and guidelines, including who needs to be notified, where those notifications need to be taking place in the facility. Is it just at the entrance to the facility? Does it have to be in the resident's room? Do the staff have to be notified, for example, and other residents and guests that come into the facility? The assumption of costs of the cameras, certainly there is a cost not only to purchasing the camera, but maintaining it, potentially even installing it. And so some of the state laws address those issues. Some of them also address penalties that could be put into place for obstruction or tampering with a recording device. And also they try to address who actually has access to the recordings, who do they belong to, who has access to them, and what the rights are of the people who are involved. So certainly it's an important issue that needs to be considered and thought about, and we have not seen, maybe in the last year or so, any states that are looking at these issues, but certainly we do recognize, as I mentioned earlier, that this is a recurring topic that ebbs and flows due to the sensationalist nature of elder abuse. And certainly we think that states need to be thinking about and talking about considerations before legislation is passed. And certainly anyone, a family member, a resident, or anyone else who may be interested in installing either a hidden camera or other type of recording device needs to be taking some different considerations into account before they just install it, because there may be some consequences related to that. Next slide, please. We have had some conversations with residents and former residents about this issue. A few years ago, we facilitated a focus group with some residents where we got their opinions about whether they would want cameras installed in their rooms, what they thought about imposing the cameras, what they thought about the impact on their own privacy rights, dignity issues, choice issues. And not only did we do that a couple of years ago, but actually a few months ago, we also had a similar conversation with some members of our Consumer Advisory Committee about the same topic. And generally, the residents and former residents that we talked to have told us that they may not want cameras in their own rooms, that it's not a choice that they would make for themselves, but certainly they see how the use of cameras would be beneficial for some residents, particularly those, excuse me, with severe dementia, who are unable to communicate themselves and whom they felt were extremely vulnerable. So certainly thinking through what the use and benefit of the camera is and what it's being used for, and certainly getting the input to the greatest extent possible from residents is an important consideration. Talking to the residents. There actually currently is a lawsuit that's pending right now in a state where the guardian of a severely incapacitated resident has actually sued to allow the use of a camera in the resident's room as a means of monitoring and protection, and frankly, a means of communication for that person. So we'll be watching the outcome of that case and certainly share that when we're able to share more information about it. We also had some conversations with ombudsmen, particularly in those states where there are laws around the use of cameras, but also in a couple states that did not have laws, and asked their perspectives. What are they seeing and hearing about the use of these cameras? And their responses, what they said is that responses from residents varied. Some residents had no concerns about the use or placement of a device. Others were adamantly opposed. And one of the quotes that was shared with us from an ombudsman was one resident had said to him, if anyone ever places a camera in their room, they would never go back in their room again. So certainly thinking about choice and the perspective of the resident is a really important issue. Next slide, please. So we are, in our work on this issue of with the National Center on Elder Abuse, we are about to be releasing a consumer fact sheet that will have not only some overarching information about residents' rights and privacy and dignity issues, but some of the issues that are raised in the different laws that have been passed, but also talks about some of the considerations that a family or a resident needs to take into account prior to considering installing a camera in a resident's room. And some of those considerations are put here on the slide, such as does your state have a law or guidelines that you need to be aware of and understand what the provisions are prior to installing a recording device. Does the device do audio or video recording or both? There are some challenges if you do not have consent from someone who may be recorded in states based on wiretapping laws that need to be taken into account, but also consent in terms of recording for video. Does the facility that you're in have policies? Who needs to be notified of the presence of the camera? How often should the camera be turned on and turned off, and who gets to decide that? Who can access the recording? What are you going to do with the information that's been recorded? All of those things really should be thought through before installing a camera. And certainly we would highly recommend to any consumer or family member that's thinking about installing a recording device that they consult an attorney prior to doing so to make sure that they understand their rights and responsibilities for doing it. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, one of the other tenets that we're proposing is that recording devices are no substitute for personal monitoring, family involvement, and good care practices, and certainly also that any concerns about abuse, neglect, or exploitation should be reported immediately and not left to linger. So you're actually getting a bit of a early preview from some other publicity that we're going to be doing around this issue in the coming months. As I mentioned, we're going to be releasing a fact sheet within the next few weeks, and there will also be a webinar in early September that we'll be announcing in the next couple of days that I hope you will register for as well. So next slide, please. So we're coming to the close of our hour. We would certainly like to hear from you about any feedback you have on this call, the structure of the calls, any hot topics that you might be thinking about or working on or would like to hear us talk about or bring in some guest speakers about in the future. So we're going to open the lines for the last few minutes and would really love to hear from all of you about what's either going on in your state or some other things that you might like to hear us talk about. So let's mute the lines here. We're going to go down and try to unmute. Let's see, some of you are self-muted. So if we're going to try and unmute your lines. Well, I'm having a little trouble doing that. If you, on your control panel, you can unmute your lines yourselves. For those of you who might be interested or willing to share things that you're working on or feedback on today's call, or you can certainly type it into the question box. So did I hear anyone on the line? Yeah. I hear someone has unmuted. Are you there?
Yeah, you just want.
Hi, okay, folks are unmuted. I can see you now. So would love to hear any feedback you have on the content of today's call, on things you might like to hear more about.
Hey, Lori, can you hear me?
Yes, Alice, I
don't want you
can.
to worry one little bit about anything. I'm right here for you.
Oh, I think somebody else is talking. Well, first of all, thank you. I learned so much. I guess I have a question related to the new nursing home regulations, and this may be more specific that you want to get, but I'm in and out of nursing homes in Maryland and Michigan all the time. I am not seeing things like that used to be basic, like posting of the rights, posting how to call an ombudsman, and I'm not seeing almost only in one facility have I seen staffing posting, showing how many CNAs are on duty, what rooms they're assigned to. Has that changed in the new nursing home regulations?
That has not changed, so you should still be seeing those things in the nursing home. Certainly
Yeah.
the information about the ombudsman and about
I'm even finding surveys not being posted and are not being easily accessible. So part of me thinks that this going back to the basics, like you shared today, and the posting of the rights is really, really important. And I really appreciate it. And I personally like the agenda. I learned a lot. I think it's a lot of work for y'all. And I hope one of the members on this call won the lottery, and then we can all make big donations to you.
Well, we would hope so too. So thanks so much for your feedback, Alice.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? And if you have background noise and you're able to mute your line again, please do so that we can hear those who are talking.
Right. That's
and that's the thing.
Any other feedback?
Doesn't expect to go back to, you know, so I don't know how it works. I would, yeah, maybe find out and let me know.
Okay. Well, certainly we welcome you to send in comments through the question or chat box, to email us at any time, and we will certainly try to be as responsive as we are able and get back with you in a timely fashion if you have questions. But think about different topics that you'd like to hear on these member calls, and reach out to us and let us know. Any of the staff are always available, or you can reach us through our info@theconsumervoice.org email account, and we are checking that regularly throughout each day. With that, we're at the top of the hour, and we will close for today, but thank you so much for joining us on today's call, and we hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll send out more information about the next call. Actually, one thing, as I'm noticing the slides going through, I did not mention a reminder about our Consumer Voice Conference, which is coming up November 5th through 8th here in the Washington, D.C. area. Please try to join us. We've got a great program that we're in process of planning for you. More information about the conference is available on our website, and we'll be sharing it through email blasts. We're going to be sending out new updated information shortly, so we look forward to seeing you then, and thanks so much for your membership, your support, and participation, and we look forward to engaging with you soon. So have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.